Welcome to the Sylum Rants podcast. Today is Friday. I am excited for today's episode, as I always am. Uh, so I'm starting on a Friday. It's been a crazy week. I've been training a lot, dealing with business things, and having a long week. I am pretty exhausted. I'm pretty excited for the weekends. Yeah, I'm. Even though we can't do much on the weekends. We're stuck at home, but I'm so excited to not have to work as much. The rest would be very nice on my body. So yeah, we're gonna talk about last weekend's fight card, even though it's Friday and we already have a card coming up. I'm not gonna break down that card. I'm actually gonna break down last weekend's card. So if you guys already heard a lot of stuff about last weekend's card, I'm sorry that you're gonna have to listen to it again, or you can just go somewhere else, I guess. Um, yeah. So I'm not gonna make this a super long podcast. By the way, if my audio is kind of weird, something was happening with my mic, and that's actually why I'm recording today, also because I've been having problems with my mic. I don't know why. It wasn't working that well, and then I feel like the volume's pretty low, and I've done everything to try to raise it. I'm gonna try my best in like post editing to raise the volume, but if it's not raised enough, I'm sorry. And yeah, so let's move forward. Uh, let's start with Bobby Green versus Venata, Lando Venata. I like both of these guys. I don't know why. I get excited when I see these guys on a card. I feel like they have a very unique style and they bring cool things to the table and they always have exciting fights. So the fact that they did this rematch, I'm pretty happy about it. Bobby Green does a really good job moving his head after his punches. He never keeps his head on he never keeps his head on the center line, which is good. When he does this thing, which I think is very important, that you see a lot of boxers do, is when you throw your cross, you have to exit on the same side. You have to move your head out of the way. And the reason why is because that's where the check hook is coming from. It's going to come on the same side that you're punching usually. And getting your head off the center line is important. And he does that very well, and he was mixing it up. Venata, a good front runner, a good. He seemed actually a lot less. He seemed less flashy in many ways, which was good. He was sticking behind his punches and his jabs, and but at the same time, I didn't see the same diversity. Like, so you don't have to be diverse just for the sake of being diverse, like how he was before. You have to plant your techniques at the right time, at the right place. You can't just throw wheel kicks for no reason, which that's what he was doing. And it wasn't like he was throwing wheel kicks and then setting them up with punches, let's say like Connor does. He was just throwing them because that was the strike that he was throwing, and they had no real context behind it. There was no build up to it. There was nothing leading to it, no feints. And he's been developing a more basic fundamental style, which is good, but he can't let go of the ability that he has to kick. I think that's what made him unpredictable, and his footwork was pretty decent. He covered distance well, but he's kind of, I feel like, losing his step a little bit. He does things well. For example, when going for when he's getting up from the bottom, he does a good job getting a knee shield and posting all their weight on that knee and then getting up to his leg, almost like a floating technical stand up. And then he'll stand up from there. And he does a lot of things like that where technically he's very sound. And maybe he's just a little off beat. He's a little slower to the punch, or he just he he doesn't remind me. Okay, so for example, he used to remind me of Daikesi, right? Mark Daikesi, that's how you say him. Daikesi. I always forget how to say the guy's name. The guy with the red mohawk, where they are very skilled when they do a move. When they do a move, they apply a technique. They do it well, but they don't have a system behind it. They're good at doing specific moves or applying moves. They're good at executing moves. There you go. They're good at executing the moves, but they're not good at timing it properly or creating a system around doing that move. So, for example, Daikesi was going for, I believe he was going for some sort of, I think, triangle or Kimura. He was going for some sort of submission in his last fight, and there was no setup behind it. It was just him going after it. When he would do the move, it was executed really well, and he was doing everything proper, but there was no fundamental setup. So let's say like doing a Kazushi, like off balancing, or maybe going for one submission, they escape, and you know that it's going to lead to another submission. And the same thing works for striking, throwing a jab and moving your head one position. So they punch there, and then you now have a system of another attack. I felt like Venata was kind of like that before, and now he's kind of developing a system a little better, but he kind of lost a little bit of his essence, right? He's lost a little bit of some flavor to his style, and which is good because he traded off some fundamentals for it. But at the same time, if you can execute moves well, you need to learn how to integrate it. Hopefully, that's where he kind of takes his style, but at the same time, you're seeing him kind of erode a little bit. His stances, his feet seem to get more narrow and narrow. His hands would drop a little bit more. His technique would get less and less proficient and not as effective as the fight went on, which is normal, but you gotta balance how you do your training, and that's a whole nother conversation also. But yeah, and Bobby Green did a really good job again with his head movement, leaning at the waist, and with the feints. He has good boxing technique. He also lost a little bit of his what makes him him. He used to have a good Philly shell and pretty good boxing, and I feel like he still has it, but he's kind of losing the Philly shell, and he was a little sloppier in certain aspects, but he got the job done, and he bombed on Venata a couple times, and it was a good fight. It was an interesting fight. The next fight was Joanne Calderwood and Jennifer Maya. Joanne Calderwood took down Maya, which her last name is Maya. Why would you do that? And from close guard, Maya was able to get an armbar, and like I said, I've been obsessed with armbars recently. I've been teaching a lot of armbars, applying a lot of armbars, and we talked about Fabricio Verdum's armbar last podcast. So if you guys want to get a breakdown of Fabricio Verdum's armbar, listen to the last podcast because I broke down a lot of fundamental principles you want to apply. And something that Maya did really well was she always, when you go for an armbar, you always want to get a deep hook. So with your arm, right? So you're attacking her arm and you're holding her arm with one arm or another. One arm should be a deep hook, meaning your arm should go all the way through, like through her elbow line, and you guys should be elbow to elbow, right? So you should be hugging her elbow essentially between your bicep and your forearm. And instead of going elbow to elbow, she went elbow to wrist. And I explained last podcast that if you want to break a grip on an armbar, you always want to go elbow to elbow for the entry phase. But when we're starting to separate the hands, you want to go elbow to wrist. And why do you want to go elbow to wrist? Because that's the end of the lever. That's the end of it. Just like when they say in wrestling, you want to control. If you can control their head, you control their body. Right? They say that in wrestling a lot. If you control their head, you control their body. And for arm bars, if you control the wrist, you control the arm. And then the finishing mechanics is slightly different because then you want to control the wrist and hand at the same time. It's called half hand grips. You could learn about these things in John Danaher's DVD. But what she did really well was, first of all, she hugged her leg, which was good because she couldn't stand up. So even if someone stacks you, people talk a lot about stacking and stacking. Well, the stacking is fine if you have an armbar. The problem is actually when they stand up and stack you. Obviously, you can get an even better toss, which is pretty much essentially throwing them over their base of support. So you want to turn the angle and throw them over their base of support. It's kind of hard to explain. You guys have to see videos on this. But She was doing a good job controlling her leg. So not only did it stop the stand up, but it also stopped which I think she was able to stand up at one point because she had a good elbow to wrist control. But initially, she did hug the leg to stop the stand up when she was bringing the leg over the face. So yeah, she was hugging the leg, and also, man, I kind of lost my train of thought there. When you hug the leg, it stops the stand up. Not only does it stop the stand up, but it keeps your body close to the legs, which is really important because when you're going for an armbar, you want to achieve a 90-degree angle. So you should never be facing straight in front of your opponent when you're going for an armbar. Just like a triangle, which people get this wrong with triangles, you want a 90-degree angle between your head or your torso and their torso. So you should essentially be staring at their ear when you're going for an armbar. Same thing for a triangle. And she did a good job hugging her leg to achieve that angle. And she just went wrist to elbow, which is at the end of the lever. That means also Joanne Calderwood couldn't go for a rear naked choke grip. She couldn't get a bicep control. If Joanne Calderwood could have went bicep control, like a rear naked choke grip, then that would have really stopped the armbar from there. But it's not that she doesn't know that. It's just Jennifer Maya did such a good job controlling the wrist. And when someone controls your wrist, it's really hard to bend your arm at that point. There's so much weight at the end. Think about it. When you work on your biceps to get your biceps stronger, you grab the weight at your hand. You don't pick it up at your elbow, right? If think about it, if you had a dumbbell attached to your elbow, you can easily pick that up. But if it was attached to your wrist, or you're grabbing it with your hand, now it's really hard to pick up to bend that arm or pick up that arm because all the weight is at the end of the lever. So that's something to keep in mind. Elbow to wrist control. Put all the weight on that wrist. That's only when you're separating the grips, not when you're controlling the arm in the beginning. When you're entering into the armbar, you want a deep hook. You need a deep hook because you gotta control the full arm. You gotta control the elbow. You can't let them slip that elbow out. If you lose the elbow, you lost the armbar. So for double measures, you can always go elbow to wrist. Elbow to wrist with one arm, and the other arm can just hug the elbow, so they can't slip out and they can't bring their arms together. So yeah, that's a couple tips for the armbar, and hopefully you guys go and do some research and apply that in training if you train. If not, apply that to your studying because it will help you see these things and you're going to learn more and more. Now, I know there's a bunch of fights in between, and there were good fights last weekend, really good fights. But I'm gonna go quickly just over Edmen, Shahbazyan, and Brunson. It's gonna be kind of a short podcast, which is yeah, I don't have time today, unfortunately. So yeah, shout out to Sensei Seth. Hey Sensei Seth, man, if you do listen to this, guys, if you can tag this to Sensei Seth, that would be awesome. I'm a big fan of that guy. He's a cool guy. And shout out to that guy because he did a sparring session with Derek Brunson. And Derek Brunson usually is known for being a front runner and for going in and throwing missiles with his chin wide open and really bending at the waist, making sure that his head is well past his knees or even his toes. It looks kind of ridiculous, but when you saw him spar with Sensei Seth, when you saw him spar with Seth, he was so patient. Not only was he patient, it was very interesting to see all the different styles in his gym. Guys, look at that video. It's cool to see that you have guys with such a diversity of striking. Usually when you go to a gym, you see very similar styles because, usually everybody imitates their coach or the best guy in the gym. Or maybe they come from just a style and they follow that style. But everybody in his gym looked vastly different and none of them looked like Derek Brunson at all, which was very, very interesting. But he was so back to what I saw in the video. Derek Brunson looked super patient, and he seemed more technical, and his striking seemed a little more consistent. Even if it wasn't the best looking striking, it was consistent striking, and his legs seemed like they had a good stance the whole time. He had better fight IQ. Just looking at at the sparring footage, and seeing that, I realized, man, Derek Brunson is most likely gonna beat Shahbazyan just from seeing that. And I was actually very surprised to see that Edmen was a really big underdog because Brunson has fought the who's who. He fought Yoel. He fought Anderson Silva. He fought uh who else did he fight? He fought a lot of guys. And why can't I not think of who else he fought? He fought Machida, right? Yeah, he fought Machida, and he's just a vet at this point. So to see him fight Edmen, I think he's 22 or 21. He didn't need this fight. That was the UFC has a. I would say the UFC has an opposite problem of Bellator or Strikeforce, where they just throw guys to the wolves. Scott Coker takes his time, almost too much. Like he takes forever to build up fighters, which can be good, but at the same time he, kind of overdoes it. But in the UFC, man, they take no time to throw you in with the wolves. Like it, this kid is young. It was not necessary to put him against Derek Brunson. It even he did great against Brad Tavares, so I can't say that was a bad matchup. But even then, it's not necessary. We can build his confidence, let him create his style, what makes him comfortable, what let him evolve a little bit. But to see him get beat up by Derek Brunson, it wasn't necessary. So yeah, um, Edmen was doing a great job punching off of Brunson's kicks. Brunson doesn't have the best kicks, but Edmen was doing a good job throwing hooks off of the kicks, and he was making him really pay for that. Um, Derek Brunson added a same side wrist ride, which is really cool because that's kind of like the new thing right now because of Habib going for wrist rides, and that's good. We need that development, but not everybody's utilizing it. But he did, and I found that cool. The fact that I believe he's like 36, 37, around there. He's older, and he's applying new techniques, especially modern techniques, is really cool. He didn't. What Habib does well. Look at the Connor fight. What Habib does well is when you start to wall walk. Maybe you post up on a knee, or maybe your legs are straight, but you put your back against the cage. He does a good job not only wrist riding, but he does a really good job with leg lacing or lacing, like locking your legs in to make sure that you can get up with that base of support. And that would have done great for him in the fight. He he was going for wrist rides, which helped obviously, but leg lacing from the cage is really important because once that stops the wall walk essentially, right? Which is really big to hold someone down. Guys nowadays, since Chuck Liddell days or earlier, people are good at wall walking. So a way to stop that is just leg lacing and making sure you either lace both legs, or if they're starting to tripod or get to their knees, leg lace that or lock in the nearest leg that's to you. That's the base of support, and that would have been good for Brunson because even though he was going for wrist rides, Edmen was able to stand up because he wasn't controlling the legs well enough. Um, yeah, Brunson did a really good job striking off the takedowns and against the cage. He lost control at time. There was times he could have kept controlling Edmen instead of just separating and going for strikes. He actually paid for it a couple times because there's times when to keep the control on the fighter because they're, you know, you could take them down or you can control them better and really weigh on them. But there's times where he just Edmen's hands weren't busy and he just let go of him, and Edmen's hands were ready to strike back also. But instead, at over time in the fight, I'm sorry that I'm just stuttering and like struggling here. Um, yeah. So over the course of the fight, he was able to weigh on him more and more and more and pressure him more and more. And Edmen was not ready for that pressure, it seemed like. And he would just go for a takedown and come up and start striking him and put his forehead under his chin and just rip on him. And it was a good veteran move on Brunson's part to stop that hype train. He didn't allow Edmen to stay behind his stance. Edmen does a really good job staying behind his stance and using it to move. He's very consistent in staying within his stance, which is really important. But Brunson just broke him down by pushing him up against the cage and throwing those weird missile punches. I really struggle on that one, and just covering that distance. The stoppage was pretty decent. Oh wait, before I even get to that, Brunson did a really cool back body lock like sweep. To do that move, because we practice that move. To do that move well, you want to make sure you really put weight on that other leg, or you do it when they're trying to wall walk. That's actually one thing Brunson did do to counter the wall walk, even though he couldn't lace up his legs, which I think he should add. He what he would do was he would get a back body lock, and every time Edmen would try to wall walk, he would try to do that foot sweep, which is a good option. Yeah, so Edmen was out from that elbow at the end, and there's obviously controversy here because people are bored, and everybody wants to make Herb Dean seem like the worst ref ever. Is he the best ref? He's messed up before. He's messed up a couple times, but he's not the worst ref out there, and people are giving him a really hard time. There was some weirdness, so I can see why there's some controversy, but one wasn't there in MMA, right? Between the judges, their incompetence, and the ref that kind of they know what they're doing, but at the same time, the sport is so new and there's so many gray areas that it's hard for them to ref. Uh, besides besides all that, yeah, Edmen was out with that elbow. Herb just subtly came in and waved off the fight, but then didn't, which was weird. You see his little hand kind of like wave off the fight, but he didn't. And Brunson even looked confused. I think he thought the fight was over. If you look at it, he looked like he stopped and he thought the fight was over, but it wasn't. And then they gave Edmen a lot of time to recover, which was really weird because he's either out or he's not. It was like extra precaution to not make fans mad, but at the same time, if you know that he's that off, then just waive the fight instead of letting him recover, which isn't fair for Brunson. That was weird. He was clearly out, and he wasn't very responsive in the corner. You can tell he was done, and I think it was the job of the coach of either Henry Hoof, which he's known for just, walking out on Anthony Johnson's last fight, right? Not being there for his fighter, right? Great coach. Or Edmund Targaryen, right? Edmund Targaryen, let's just say that. It's easier to say. He obviously doesn't have the best reputation of being a cornerman, right? You heard it with Ronda Rousey, and you heard him with Travis Brown. He's not the best cornerman, of course. He didn't stop the fight either. Both guys are not known for being great cornermen, in my opinion. To me, Henry Hoof does have a more extensive background with training good fighters and having a long career of training, or at least a reputable career of training fighters. But I've seen little things here and there that make me believe that he's a little, either he has too many fighters, so he doesn't care enough, or he's just a asshole. So it's either one of the two. And either one of them should have stopped the fight at the very end. He was out. Okay? If I saw my fighter go out like that, which you know because you're a coach, that he's out, stop the fight. Stop the fight. He's young. He's gonna fight. He's gonna live to fight another day. Why have him go out there and just get outclassed in the third round just to get beat up and then have Herb stop the fight? It's just not necessary. And yeah, that was not necessary. So one thing Edmen does do, so going back to the fight, which I didn't cover these things. Edmen has a good hook. He does a really good job stepping and leaping into his hooks, and that actually kind of got him in trouble because he didn't set up a couple, and he kind of went too wide with the hooks, and that kind of messed him up. A good example of a good talking about Habib already, he has a good hook. Want to talk about good hook? Habib, look at him. He had a good sneaky hook against Connor. He has a very sneaky hook, and he leaps into it too, but it's very very short and tight. It's a good hook, and I'm glad I'm talking good about Habib here because I talk really good about Connor a lot, and I feel like a lot of people think I'm a Connor nut hugger. So yeah, and another thing that's upsetting was I think Edmen or one of them got yeah, it was Edmen. He got eye poked, and it's upsetting that you have two options when you get eye poked. It's either you're ready to fight or we're gonna call in a doctor, and if you don't tell them that you want to fight right away, well then they stop the fight. You don't get 5 minutes for eye pokes. I'm maybe they changed it in some states, but you don't get 5 minutes for eye pokes. It's either you can't fight or you can. And I think that's dumb because for growing strikes, you have 5 minutes. And yeah, you could say, well, growing strikes are part of the sport and they're normal, while eye pokes aren't. And it makes it either no contest or not. And I think that's ridiculous because with the open gloves, it's not like boxing. An eye poke is very common. You grab, especially with the UFC gloves, which I talked about last podcast, where they need a revamp and they have a solution, but they don't want to. Look up Trevor Whitman and his boxing gloves and that whole story. Not boxing gloves, sorry, MMA gloves. But yeah, the besides the design of the gloves, the sport naturally has your hands open a lot because you're grappling and you frame off of people. So open hands are normal. So it's part of the sport, not in a good way, but they're part of the sport, like how growing shots are. If anything, they're worse because at least you have a cup for growings and you don't have anything for your eyes. So I think they need to give 5 minutes for fighters to recover, just like they would for growing shots. And I think they do the same thing for for illegal strikes as well too. They give you 5 minutes to recover. And yeah, so that was today's podcast. We went for like 27 minutes, which short and sweet. Um, Next fight card is going to be entertaining with Derek Lewis and Olenek, right? They're fighting. It's going to be a good one. Olenek is 105, and Derek Lewis has a messed up hip. So there goes that, and that's going to be super entertaining. Yeah, so if you guys can, like, subscribe. That intro is going to be made soon. And please share and comment. If you're here by the end, please put a thumbs up. And so I can know that you got to the end of the podcast. And yeah, guys, Instagram, Sylum Rants no, sorry, that's the podcast name. Instagram handle is Rants Martial Arts. Wow, that I think it's Sylum Rants Martial Arts Official. Forgot. I forgot. This is a great ending. I suck at ending this stuff. It's like I just keep talking and talking and talking. Have a great weekend, guys. Have a good weekend of fights. I hope you guys are doing well or do well, whatever you want to say. I am starting to go crazy at this end because nothing makes sense. I'm rambling. Okay, guys, I'm going to end it now. Have a great weekend and please like, subscribe, thumbs up if you made it here. Love you, mwah, and bye.